So here's our third example with the chain rule. This is y equals x minus 1 divided by x plus 2, and then all of that squared. So there are actually a few different ways to do this. So what we could do is rewrite this as x minus 1 squared over x plus 2 squared, and then FOIL the top and the bottom, and then just do quotient rule. And that actually won't be too bad. It'll be a little bit messy, kind of, not really I guess, but let's avoid that. And let's just go ahead and get some more practice with the chain rule. So we're going to do the same things we did before in the last two videos. So let's go ahead and erase this. And we're going to identify what's the big guy, what's the little guy. And we're going to call the big guy F and the little guy G. So what we want to do is start at the X. Now there's two X's, but we can actually start at either one, doesn't really matter. Then we just work our way out until we're done. So here's x minus 1, here's an x plus 2. Alright, and then after that they're being divided. Alright, but then after that, everything is being squared. Okay, so you start at either of the x's. Here, start up here, you have x minus 1, here's another x, add 2 to it, and then once you're done with that, divide both of those, and then after that's done, then you square everything. So the biggest thing happening is a squaring. So that's our big guy, there, F. And then the little guy is what's on the inside, so that'll be our G. Alright, so in other words, f of x is x squared, and then g of x is, what's on the inside here is x minus 1 over x plus 2. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Now what's y? Well, y is x minus 1 over x plus 2, whole thing squared. Alright. But this is just g of x, quantity squared. So that's a g of x, whole thing being squared. But g of x, whole thing squared. Here, f of x is x squared, so f of g of x is g of x squared. So this is f of g of x. Alright? Now that's good because y is f of g of x. So then the chain rule tells us that y primed equals f primed of g of x times g primed of x. Okay, so now let's figure out what these things are. So here, if f of x is x squared, then that means f primed of x is just 2x. But just like before, we don't want f primed of x, we want f primed of g of x. So f primed of g of x is 2 times g of x. Alright, which is 2 times x minus 1 over x plus 2. And let's go ahead and leave that like that for now. We could, put the 2 on the top and distribute it so we have 2x minus 2 over x plus 2, but let's just leave that like that for now. It'll be easier a little bit later. So anyway, that's our f primed of g of x. So let's go ahead and write that over here. Y primed equals f primed of g of x, which we just found is 2 times x minus 1 over x plus 2. Alright, and now we need to multiply by g primed of x. So what's g primed of x? Well, that's going to be a little more complicated because we're going to need the quotient rule, right? G of x is x minus 1 over x plus 2. So let's come up here and find out what g primed of x is. Let's come up here. So g of x is x minus 1 over x plus 2. Okay? So then g primed of x from the quotient rule is going to be bottom times the derivative of the top, alright, and the top is x minus 1, so its derivative is just 1, and then minus the top times the derivative of the bottom is x plus 2, so its derivative is just 1, and then all of that divided by the bottom squared. Alright, and we don't really need to FOIL the bottom, let's just leave it like that for now. So when we simplify, what do we have? We have x plus 2, alright, and then minus here, so multiplying by 1 doesn't really do anything, but we have this minus sign out here, so if we want to distribute that through, then we have minus x, and then, let's zoom in a little bit here, we're going to have minus x and then plus 1, okay, because this minus 1 and this minus sign combine to give us plus 1, okay, and then all over x plus 2 quantity squared still. Okay, so separate that. So then simplifying x plus 2 minus x, so those cancel, and then we have plus 2 plus 1, So that's going to be 3 over x plus 2 quantity squared. So this is g prime of x. Okay? G prime of x equals that equals 3 over x plus 2 quantity squared. Alright, so then y primed is f prime to g of x times g prime of x. Here's f prime to g of x. Now we multiply by g prime of x, which is this, 3 over x plus 2 quantity squared. Alright, now let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Okay, so now we're ready to combine, simplify, etc., etc. So y prime equals, here 2 times 3 is going to give us 6, and that's all being multiplied by the x minus 1 over here, right? Because really it's like this. Okay, you want to be careful with that. And then what's on the bottom? X plus 2 times x plus 2 squared. So that's actually x plus 2 quantity cubed. Alright? So that's our answer here. That's our derivative that we found from the chain rule. So if y is x minus 1 over x plus 2 quantity squared, then y primed is 6 times quantity x minus 1 all over x plus 2 quantity cubed. Like that. Okay? So that's kind of with the long way that we've been doing with the chain rule. But let's go ahead and do it let's talk about it the quicker, shorter way. Just because it's good to get practice doing that. So we're going to ignore the f and the g here. We still want to identify what's the big guy, what's the little guy, but we're not going to call them f and g anymore, just so we can get practice doing that more generally. Okay? So here y equals x minus 1 over x plus 2 quantity squared, and we want to find y primed. So y primed is going to be derivative of the big guy evaluated at the little guy times the derivative of the little guy. So little guy is x minus 1 over x plus 2 because that's on the inside, and then the big guy happens to everything, and the squared here is affecting everything. Okay, so the squared is the big guy. Alright, so derivative of squaring things is going to be 2 times a thing to the first power. And what's the thing? Well, the chain rule says this is going to be the little guy. So in other words, when you do the derivative of the big guy, leave the little guy inside of it alone. Alright? Or, like we've been saying, derivative of the big guy evaluated at the little guy, and then multiplied by the derivative of the little guy. Multiplied by the derivative of the little guy. Okay? And again, this is a 1, not a primed, up here. Okay, so now this is going to be 2 times, so we can drop these parentheses pretty much, 2 times x minus 1 over x plus 2, and then derivative of this, again we use the quotient rule, but since we did this earlier in the video, let's not do it again, but remember that was a 3 over x plus 2 quantity squared. Okay, so then this is just the same thing we had before, so when we simplify it, we're just going to get, of course, the same answer, right, which was this. So again, this first step, this calculus step, really, as you deal with more and more complicated expressions, it's not so much the calculus that's going to get you, but it's probably the algebra. So simplifying this wasn't really too bad, but if you have a nasty function to start with, applying the chain rule probably isn't going to be the confusing part, but probably the confusing, or at least the tedious part, will be simplifying it algebraically, if you have to. But anyway, just to recap this real quick, x minus 1 over x plus 2 whole thing squared. So the big guy is squaring things. Okay, the big guy happens to everything, and that's the squared up here, because that affects everything. Okay, it affects the x minus 1, the x plus 2, and dividing them, it affects all of that. Okay, so that's our big guy. The little guy is just everything on the inside. So derivative of the big guy is this, and then evaluated at the little guy is this, and then multiply by the derivative of the little guy. So that's the chain rule there. Alright, and that's what's going on here. So let's go ahead and do some more examples in the next few videos.